Okay, let's dive in. We've got a stack of source material here, some really fascinating research, details on a specific study, and various notes.
Mm,
And they're pointing to a connection that, well, it might sound pretty wild at first glance.
it really might. We're doing a deep dive into this surprising link between what's happening in your mouth,
Right.
specifically gum disease,
Hmm.
and the health of your heart, particularly the risk of atrial fibrillation or AFib.
Yeah, our mission with these sources is to really understand how something that seems so localized, an infection in your gums,
Mm,
how could that potentially throw off the rhythm of your heart? It feels, well, counterintuitive, doesn't it?
it absolutely does. But, clinicians have suspected a link for a while now. There's this longstanding clinical association
Okay.
between periodontitis, that's the serious form of gum disease, and various cardiovascular issues.
And our sources are highlighting some recent analysis, right?
Right.
Including a meta-analysis
Yeah.
that put a pretty compelling number on it, linking periodontitis to a, 30% higher risk of developing AFib?
A 30% higher risk.
Yeah.
That's not a small correlation at all,
No.
especially when you think about the context, what's happening globally.
Right.
I mean, cases of AFib have been steadily climbing.
Yeah, I saw the numbers like 33.5 million worldwide back in 2010
Mhm.
and up to nearly 60 million by 2019. That's huge.
It's a massive increase.
Yeah.
So you can see why researchers are digging into all potential factors, even surprising ones like this.
Okay, so for a long time, the main thinking about how gum disease might affect, say, the heart or other parts of the body, it's centered around inflammation, correct?
Exactly. That was the dominant theory. The idea was you get this chronic infection in the gums,
Hmm.
and it triggers a big immune response.
Hmm.
This response then releases inflammatory signals like cytokines into the bloodstream.
Okay.
These signals travel everywhere, potentially causing this low-grade, widespread inflammation.
Systemic inflammation.
Precisely. Yeah. And that could impact different organs, including the heart. Makes sense.
It does. But here's where these sources reveal something new, something much more direct. And honestly, this is where it gets really interesting for me.
Yeah.
It's not just the inflammatory signals traveling around, the actual bacteria.
The bugs themselves.
Yeah, the bacteria themselves might be making the journey.
And what's fascinating here is how these sources really shine a spotlight on one specific bacterium. It's fingered as a potential key culprit.
Which one is that?
It's called Porphyromonas gingivalis. Bit of a mouthful.
Yeah.
Should probably just call it P. gingivalis from now on.
Good plan. So P. gingivalis.
Yeah.
And it turns out, according to these sources, this particular bacterium is known to be a bit of a traveler inside the body.
That's a good way to put it. It's known to venture out. The sources point out it's been found in places quite far from the mouth.
Like where?
Like the brain, the liver, even the placenta.
Wow.
And it's been linked to other systemic conditions too. Things like certain forms of dementia, diabetes, even some cancers.
So it definitely has a track record of not staying put. It gets around.
It really does. And this specific study, highlighted in the sources, it was done at Hiroshima University, published in the journal Circulation.
Okay.
It provides what the researchers believe is the first really clear evidence of P. gingivalis making that specific trip
From the gums.
from the infected gums all the way to the left atrium of the heart.
Okay, so they were really trying to nail down this specific pathway.
Exactly. They wanted to solve a mystery. There's a quote in the material from one of the lead authors, Shunsuke Miyauchi.
Mm-hmm.
He basically said they wanted to definitively answer. Does P. gingivalis actually translocate, literally move or travel from those infected areas in the gums straight to the heart's left atrium?
And the follow-up question.
And the crucial follow-up.
Mm-hmm.
If it does get there, does its presence actually cause or worsen the scarring in the atrium? That scarring is called atrial fibrosis.
And that fibrosis is linked to AFib, right?
Very strongly linked.
Mm-hmm.
It disrupts the heart's electrical signals. So does the bacteria promote fibrosis and therefore AFib? That was the core question.
So how did they test this? I saw something about a mouse model.
Yes, they used a mouse model. It was designed to mimic severe gum disease in humans.
Okay.
They took an aggressive strain of P. gingivalis, the W83 strain, and introduced it directly into the tooth pulp of one group of mice.
Ouch.
Yeah. And then they had a control group, obviously, that didn't get the bacteria.
And they watched them for how long?
They observed them over 12 weeks and then 18 weeks.
And the results, what did they find?
Well, the results told a pretty dramatic story over time. At the 12-week mark, interestingly, they didn't see a significant difference in abnormal heart rhythms between the infected group and the controls.
Okay, so it wasn't immediate.
Not immediate, but here's the critical part, the insight from the 18-week results.
Yeah.
By 18 weeks, the mice infected with P. gingivalis, they were 6 times more likely to develop abnormal heart rhythms compared to the control group.
6 times? That's huge.
It's a very significant difference. They measured something called AFib inducibility, basically, how easily they could electrically prompt the mice hearts into an AFib-like state.
Yeah.
The infected mice had a 30% rate of inducibility. The uninfected control mice, only 5%.
Wow. Okay. And did they confirm the mice actually had gum disease? Like, did the infection model work?
Oh, yes, absolutely. They confirmed the infected mice showed clear signs of severe periodontitis in their jaws. Things like tooth pulp decay, microabscesses, these tiny pockets of pus.
Okay, so the gum disease part was real.
Very real. But critically, they also needed to confirm the bacteria didn't just stay in the mouse.
Right. The translocation part, did they find it in the heart?
This is where the detective work, as you said, really paid off. They used specific genetic tests looking for the unique DNA signature of that P. gingivalis strain they'd introduced. And they found it, definitively, in the tissue of the left atrium of the infected mice.
But not in the control mice.
Exactly. The control mice, the ones with healthy gums, showed no trace of that bacterial DNA in their heart tissue.
That's really powerful evidence for the bacteria actually traveling there.
It's very strong evidence of translocation, yes.
Okay, so the bacteria gets there. The next big question is, what does it do once it arrives in the left atrium?
Right. Does it just hang out, or does it cause trouble? And the answer seems to be trouble. Specifically, damage in the form of scarring.
Atrial fibrosis.
Atrial fibrosis, exactly. They saw physical changes in the heart tissue. Even by 12 weeks, the infected mice already showed more heart scarring than the control mice.
Okay.
But by 18 weeks, the amount of scarring in the left atrium of those infected mice had climbed significantly. It reached about 21.9%.
In the controls, did they have any scarring?
They did show some, yes, around 16.3%.
Okay.
But that was likely just due to the natural aging process in the mice.
Oh.
So the key finding was that the presence of P. gingivalis seemed to be significantly speeding up and worsening that scarring process. It wasn't just aging.
And I remember reading in the sources about some visuals, some staining techniques.
Yes. Really compelling images. They use something called immunohistochemical staining.
Yeah.
It's basically like using tiny specific molecular flags to highlight things under a microscope.
And what did it show?
It showed the P. gingivalis bacteria literally entering the heart muscle tissue,
Wow.
right through the small blood vessels in the left atrium. You can almost see it happening. It looks like a tiny, focused invasion.
Like a stealth assault, as one source put it. How does it do that? How does it cause the damage?
Well, that stealth assault idea is pretty apt. Other research on P. gingivalis suggests it has this sneaky ability.
Sneaky how?
It can actually invade our own host cells. And importantly, it seems able to evade the cell's normal cleanup mechanisms. There's a process called autophagy, like a cellular garbage crew.
Right, gets rid of damaged stuff or invaders.
Exactly. And P. gingivalis seems to be able to hide from or resist that process, allowing it to persist inside the cells.
So it can kind of hide out inside our own heart cells and potentially cause damage or trigger inflammation from within without being properly cleared out.
That seems to be the thinking, yes. And the infected mice showed biological signs consistent with this kind of ongoing damage.
Like what? Were there specific markers?
Yes, biomarkers. They found a spike in a protein called galectin-3.
Galectin-3. What does that indicate?
It's basically a molecular alarm bell. Its levels go up when there's tissue damage and scarring, fibrosis happening, particularly in the heart.
Okay, so that fits.
It fits perfectly. And they also saw a higher expression of a gene called TGFB1.
And that one's linked to?
Strongly linked to inflammation and the process of scarring, fibrosis.
So multiple lines of evidence pointing towards the bacteria actively causing harm and scarring in the heart tissue.
Exactly. These biomarkers really help support the mechanism they observed visually and functionally.
Okay, that's incredibly strong evidence from the animal model. It shows the bacteria can travel from the gums, it can reach the heart, and it can cause this damaging scarring. But the million-dollar question, really, is does this actually happen in us, in humans?
And this is where that separate human study mentioned in the sources becomes absolutely vital. It bridges the gap.
What did they do in that one?
Researchers analyzed actual left atrial tissue samples. These were collected from 68 human AFib patients who were already undergoing heart surgery for other reasons.
So they had access to the relevant tissue.
Exactly. And they looked specifically for evidence of P. gingivalis in that human heart tissue.
Now, did they find it?
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
They found P. gingivalis was present in the left atrial tissue of these human AFib patients.
Wow.
And here's another crucial correlation. They found it in greater amounts in those patients who also had documented severe gum disease.
So the worse the gum disease, the more bacteria in the heart tissue.
That's the correlation they observed. This human data acts as a powerful real-world validation for the mechanism they saw so clearly in the mouse model.
Yeah.
It suggests it's not just a mouse phenomenon.
Okay, let's try and bring this all together then. For you listening, what's the big picture takeaway from digging into these sources? It sounds like we have this newly identified mechanism where this specific bacterium, P. gingivalis, from an infection in your gums can actually get into your bloodstream. It travels specifically to the left upper chamber of your heart, the left atrium.
Sets up shop there, essentially.
Right. And once it's there, it makes the natural scarring process, the fibrosis, worse. And that significantly increases your risk for AFib. Is that the core story?
That is exactly the story these sources are telling. And it's quite profound, really.
Yeah.
To echo the study's author again, those periodontal lesions, the damaged areas in your gums, they act like a gateway.
A gateway for P. gingivalis.
A gateway for P. gingivalis to enter the bloodstream. From there, it translocates, it moves specifically to the left atrium. Its presence there correlates with how bad your gum disease is. And crucially, once it's in the atrium, it actively makes that atrial fibrosis, that scarring, worse, which in turn directly drives up the risk of developing AFib.
So what does this all mean for you, the person listening? What's the practical implication?
Well, the practical implication highlighted by this research is incredibly direct. I think actually quite empowering.
How so?
It suggests that taking care of your oral hygiene, the basics, brushing thoroughly, flossing regularly, getting routine dental checkups, it might be doing so much more than just protecting your teeth and gums from cavities or, bad breath.
It could potentially be a vital strategy for protecting your heart.
Exactly. By closing or managing that gateway we talked about.
In your gums.
In your gums. You could potentially be reducing the chance for P. gingivalis to get into your bloodstream and make that dangerous journey to your heart.
So it really reframes oral health, doesn't it? It's not just about your mouth. It could be a frontline defense against a serious heart condition like AFib.
Absolutely. And the researchers involved, they're not stopping here. This isn't the end of the story.
What are the next steps?
Well, they're continuing to investigate the precise molecular steps, like how exactly does P. gingivalis interact with and damage the heart muscle cells at that level?
Okay, digging deeper into the mechanism.
Right. And maybe even more practically, they're actively working on trying to establish genuinely collaborative systems between medical doctors and dentists.
Ah, breaking down those silos.
Exactly. Starting in Hiroshima, where the study took place, the idea is to better integrate oral health assessments into overall cardiovascular care.
So your cardiologist might actually ask about your last dental visit, or vice versa?
Potentially, yes. Incorporating it into AFib prevention and treatment strategies, it makes sense, given this evidence.
It really underscores how interconnected our bodies are, doesn't it? You think of gum disease as, a mouth problem.
Localized.
But it can have these ripple effects, these systemic consequences, far beyond what maybe we previously understood.
It truly does. This deep dive into the sources, it reveals a really remarkable and I think previously underappreciated direct link between a common bug in our mouths and the delicate electrical system of our hearts.
So maybe here's a final thought to leave you with, something to chew on, building on what we've unpacked here.
Okay.
We often think of our health in compartments, right? You see a dentist for your mouth, a cardiologist for your heart, maybe someone else for another issue.
Separate specialists, separate systems.
Yeah. But this research really makes you wonder. It suggests that focusing on something as fundamental and maybe seemingly simple as brushing and flossing,
The daily routine.
that daily routine might have these profound, unexpected impacts on really complex systemic conditions like heart rhythm disorders. It just makes you consider the potential power of seeing our health as one single interconnected system.
And the exciting possibilities if different fields like dentistry and cardiology could truly collaborate more closely to tackle these big health challenges together.
A really fascinating connection. Lots to think about there.